Before the presentation begins, I'd like to give credit to Adrian von Ziegler for creating the wonderful music you'll hear in the background. It's all the same music from the stick run. Once again, I'll have a link to his channel and a playlist for all of the music used in this video in the description below. So go check out his music and consider throwing some money his way if you enjoy what you hear. Just to clarify, I am in no way, shape, or form associated with him and or his production of music. I'm just a really big fan. Hello everyone and welcome to Burnt Toaster Productions. I'm your host, Burnt Toaster. Today is a special day, my first challenge run for Dragon's Dogma. I'll preface this video by saying I will not be showing any cutscenes or having any in-game music playing in the background. This is due to Capcom being the little rascals they are and sometimes copyright claiming videos with cutscenes or the game's OST seemingly at random. Apologies, but I personally want to keep my record as clean as a trash bag that has been pulverized, burned at the stake, and then dumped in a vat of Windex. With all that done, let's get to the rules already. I can only use rusty weapons. My armor, if bought, can only cost up to 10,000 apiece. Armor that is found is free for the taking. I will be allowed to upgrade my gear. I can only use pawns that the game comes with, which means no player-created pawns will be allowed in the run. I may be being a bit too generous, but I'm allowing myself to have 9 total lives, just in case I have a particularly difficult time with one area or another. With all that done, let's get this gravy train a-rollin'. First up is character creation, and Dragon's Dogma has some nuance when it comes to messing with some of the options. The taller and weightier your character is, the more you can carry and the less likely you're to be knocked down by enemies. However, this comes at the cost of speed and increased stamina usage when using skills. The opposite is true of shorter and lighter characters. You'll find that you have a much easier time climbing and evading, as well as being able to use skills and spells more often than your taller and heavier counterparts, which is a nice little touch that kind of grounds the world into being somewhat believable. Enough of me enthusiastically telling you about small features. Since I'm slightly unsure of the build I want to go for, I go for a slightly above average character in terms of height and muscle mass. I name my character Rock since he's basically going to be eating them for the entire run. Then I'm thrown right into the heat of it. The dragon which all Arisen are made to fight attacks a small fishing village I call home, which of course ends in me being fried to a crisp. It's giving me some flashbacks of Fable already. Thanks, game. Since I can't show the cutscenes, I'll tell you what happens. The big red dragon talks to me and then yanks my heart out of my chest with one of his massive claws. He proceeds to swallow it whole. Which sounds fairly gruesome, but it happens in an instant, and I wake up a few hours later as fit as a fiddle. But, well, I'm still missing my heart. Ladies and gentlemen, get you a man like Grigori. He'll take your heart, leave, and then ask you to fight him to the death to get it back. I'm now able to choose my vocation, or in simpler, gamey terms, my class. I chose fighter since I'll have access to a shield and some nice skills which will minimally increase my chances of surviving this adventure. I then go to the inn and grab the DLC gear out of storage so I can sell it. I know this could be considered cheating, but if the stuff is gone, there won't be a moment where I'm enticed to use it. Plus, the Dark Arisen version is the only one available on Steam, so this is still pretty much the same experience anyone else would have. I decide to use that money to buy some fairly cheap armor, a few flasks of oil, and some health curatives. When I approach the gate, a pawn, which is basically a soulless husk of a human, approaches me and pledges his allegiance to me, the Arisen. The village chief suggests I go to the nearby encampment to learn more about pawns. On the way, Rook and I encounter a man beset by goblins. Even though I consider them kin, I must destroy them if I want to possibly have access to other vocations later in the game, because this man will sell you rusty weapons for different classes. In case any of you are new to Dragon's Dogma, vocations determine what weapons, skills, and armors you're allowed to use. Anyway, after saving him, he gives me a nifty leather cloak, and I return to Cassardus to accept some very basic side quests. Most side quests in this game require you to kill so many monsters or animals, find items, or escort individuals to specific places. I complete the quest to slaughter 5 rabbits, and then make my way to the encampment. I hear a disembodied voice, which is a product of a rift stone. A rift stone basically allows you to hire some support pawns. You can pretty much fine-tune your party as the situation necessitates. This is also where I'll be able to create my main pawn, the one companion that will stay with me to the end. But before I can, I'm asked to complete a humble task. This humble task involves slaying some goblins and a single Cyclops. The Cyclops is already gravely injured, so the fight isn't too difficult and it falls to my extremely rusty sword. The goblins didn't put up much of a fight either. I return to the encampment victorious and make my main pawn. I plan on having this pawn be a mix of support and DPS. So I make some short old man with the same mustache as Rock. This old man is named Roll, because the two of us will be pretty inseparable. His vocation will be Mage. Since he is short, he will be able to take full advantage of using spells a little more often than normal. I also make him ripped. I don't really know why. Sometimes even I can't seem to comprehend my brain. So there we have it, some guy who looks like he should be a particular kind of entertainer or in an 80s metal band, and some pissed off old man who probably took performance enhancers since he was born. I went ahead and bought some gear for both myself and Roll. Even though I didn't say my main pawn would be affected by the first two rules, I still try to be as stingy as possible with my spending and give him some low level gear that will show off those guns. Because if you were like 75 years old and had that much muscle, you'd probably want to show it off too. After that, we go ahead and take a nap in the encampment. We're awoken from our cat nap to the sound of a pretty loud ruckus. Initially, I thought the guards got a little too crazy with an early morning drinking session, but no, it was a giant multi-headed snake, the Hydra. In all seriousness, I wasn't too sure about how this would go since I'm basically a walking billboard for why you should get your tetanus shot. I'm mostly worried about my damage output, because to get past this encounter you'll have to cut one of the heads off. Fortunately for me, someone else got to decapitate one of the creature's heads and it slithered away to go turn off its oven or do a crossword puzzle or something. Anyway, due to my valiant attempts at slicing off a giant snake head, Sir Mercedes stands impressed and asks me to join her in delivering the big hunk of meat to the Duke. I accept, of course, because I wouldn't be able to progress the story otherwise, and it'll open up the capital of the Duchy so I can get from point A to point B a little bit quicker. I'd also like to take a look around at the smith shop to see if there's any new armor that I may be able to buy or possibly enhance my gear further, since most of it has only been enhanced once. Enhancement is what I meant when I said I could upgrade my gear. I just couldn't remember the proper term when I started typing up the script and made the audio. Since Mercedes has decided to leave for the Way Castle to the capital, I exit the encampment and a villager from Cassardus asks me a question regarding the whereabouts of Kina. Kina is the daughter of the village chief and she went to some forest in search of something for my wounds. Considering the bandits there could easily kick my teeth in, it's difficult for me to find a reason to go and check on her. I'm sure she'll be fine. Because I forgot to get another pawn like the doofus I am, I go back to the encampment and look for a suitable pawn to aid us in battle. I settled on a strider named Pierre. I would have preferred a pawn named Robert or something, just so I could have a full party of people whose names start with an R. But oh well, we got some weird French guy with us. Regardless, we set on the path to the Way Castle and came across some bandits looking for an easy mark. Unfortunately for them, I have a full party and a rusty sword, so they fall fairly easily. We continue on the road, come across another group of bandits and some doggos. Wolves can be quite the slippery little rascals, but just like goblins, they're weak to fire. A couple of roasted wolves later, my party and I meet up with Mercedes to escort the wagon to the capital. The way there isn't too crazy. We fight some goblins, harpies, and wolves. The harpies are pretty easy to deal with since Rook has Fire Boon, and I can use shield summons to get them to target me. Harpies happen to catch fire really easily and it stops them from being able to fly away. They're already weak, so this just expedites the process of killing them. There was one exciting thing that happened, and that was a big rock rolling towards us like we were in an Indiana Jones movie. The ox pulling the cart could get quite injured. I had to stop it somehow, and because Pierre was too far away, I grabbed a Rook and threw him at the boulder that was barreling down towards us. My lifting and throwing of Rook was for nothing though, since Pierre decided to just face tank a boulder. Just a flesh wound, he'll be fine. There was another small group of bandits waiting near the end of the road to Grand Soren, which of course the party and I dispatched them with ease. Since all the fighting was done, I hitched a ride on the ox and we successfully made it to Grand Soren, the beating heart of all Granzus. Oh god, I think I'm turning into a pawn. We get a night of rest, after which Mercedes tells me to sojourn in the capital a while. You don't have to tell me twice. Before I could go anywhere, a man named Mason approached me and directed me to the Pawn Guild to get some more information about pawns. I don't really need to since I know they're basically just walking meat puppets made to follow my command to defeat the dragon. But Mason seems like a cool dude, so I'll do it. Just not right now. First stop is the smith's shop. I go through his inventory and everything is a little too expensive for my tastes. However, he will enhance my gear, granted I have the needed materials and a bit of money. After enhancing all of my gear I could, I made a little stop at the inn. Most inns offer the ability to store items, learn and set skills, as well as change vocations for yourself and your main pawn. I don't have any other rusty weapons, so I'll have to pass on the vocation change for now. I upgraded Burst Strike to Blitz Strike and grabbed Skyward Slash to deal with pesky harpies later on in the game. I then get the Deflect core skill. I also give Roll some new skills, namely Frazzle, Levin, and Halidom. The first two are just to possibly cover some elemental weakness exploitation, and Halidom is to cure a nice chunk of debilitations. Because inns allow me to store items, I go ahead and put the things I don't need at the moment into storage. If I don't, I'll become slow and use up more stamina anytime I sprint or use a skill. With all that done, I go and speak to Barnaby, the sort of manager for the Pawn Guild. He gives me some info and then has a quest of his own for me. Apparently, something funky is happening in the Everfall. My job is to go down there to investigate and report my findings back to him. We interrupt your regularly scheduled content to bring an addendum to the rules. After looking around the wiki for more information about rusty weapons, I found out they can cause debilitations, specifically torpor and poison. So, to kind of level this out, I will only be allowed to have support pawns that have a max level of 10. I already said they were walking meat puppets, so why not make this more of a challenge and turn them into literal meat sacks that get obliterated in one hit. This won't have any bearing on the bits you've watched, since Ruck only recently reached level 10, and I haven't recruited any new support pawns. Now, back to the content. So it's time to go and investigate the Everfall. This place is a tiny bit tough even if you have updated gear and support pawns. This is due to the fact that there are enemies here that can either do decent damage or spawn in large to medium groups. Skeletons may sound like a joke, but when you have low damage output, low level pawns, and they're in a large group, that joke suddenly turns into a situation as serious as a heart attack. If that wasn't enough, there are undead lying around the place. The good thing about these rotting buffoons is the fact that they're quite slow. However, they have a slight trick up their sleeve, and that is to grab you. You have to either fight them off, or a pawn has to do enough damage to open them up to be knocked down. Which, that's one of the other bad things about facing the undead. They're tanky unless you have a mage with holy or fire boon, and they have incredible poise. You can knock them down, but you'll likely have to soften them up before succeeding. If that wasn't bad enough, there's an ogre in here that you're meant to avoid because ogres are quite tough and deal some beefy damage to boot, especially with your current gear and levels this early into the game as a newly born Arisen. Now with this particular ogre, you can try to beat him into running or drop kicking himself off the side of the ledge, which would kill him instantly and give you the XP for his demise. But it isn't guaranteed, and due to that, I decide against chancing it. More than likely he would throw me off the side and I'd be the little splat on the ground. Instead, we go through it the intended way, which involves going through a side path near where the ogre is. This path has skeletons, undead, and harpies, all of which give me a run for my money. Well, besides the harpies, because let's face it, the only thing that makes them moderately threatening is the fact that they can put you to sleep or pick you up and drop you. After wading through all manner of creatures, the party and I finally made it to the bottom floor. There was a port crystal, which I took because there are a few locations that you'll want to fast travel to get to later, and Dragon's Dogma only allows you to fast travel to Cassardus and Grand Soren by default. So I'll hold on to the port crystal a while and get to investigating. There was a light and draft coming from the floor. Before I could investigate further, some tentacles popped up from the ground. There's no point in trying to fight them, so I run. While on my marathon, I did accidentally run into the ogre, and let's just say my pawns became mincemeat. I got out unscathed, so all is good, and they spawn with me when I get back to the guild. I pick them up and tell Barnaby what I saw. He says he and the other pawns there will have to double their efforts in keeping watch on the Everfall. With that hellhole done with, I go to the Riftstone and get some new higher level pawns. They're not much better, but I'll take what I can get. Meet the new members of this god-awful hodgepodge team, Brendan and Pasquale. I think that's how you pronounce it anyway. This is likely the composition I'll stay with when it comes to my party. You typically need at least one mage to keep the party healed and exploit enemy weaknesses, but I usually go for 2 of them for the sake of having more clearly defined roles. I typically have one work mostly for buffing and healing and the other for damage dealing and debuffing. Though that means half the party is squishier than that houseplant you got when you moved into your own domicile. In other words, I'm playing a rather dangerous game as a tank that can't really tank at the moment. Before I leave the guild, a guard comes to me with a message. Sounds like the Duke was pretty happy that I assisted in cutting one of a Hydra's heads off, and he has invited me to join in the worm hunt. I then go ahead and upgrade one of my rusty pieces of gear, particularly the sword, and now I'm able to cause poison damage. Or in other words, I'm actually capable of giving everything I face tetanus, so long they don't actually fully resist poison. I also upgraded some of my skills as well. I grabbed Simple Onslaught, the Vigilance Augment, and Broad Slash. Roll also sees some upgraded skills as well. High Frazzle, High Lovin', Fire Boon, and Holy Boon. He only has one skill slot left, so I just give him Fire Boon for now. The next quest I decide to do is the Cipher. Sir Maximilian hands you an ancient slate that people in these modern times can't read. Luckily, instead of going on a wild goose chase, I can sequence break and go straight to where I need to go. On my way there, I encounter more bandits. No surprise there since the roads are rife with the little weasels. One guy tried to rob the party and however, he didn't realize that we would completely decimate him. I also somehow got a perfect block, which I haven't really been able to do. Likely has to do with shield quality and having fairly precise timing. Sadly, I encountered a fairly large, well-armed, and armored group of them shortly after Homeslice tried to take my stuff. I'm sure having low-level support pawns didn't help, and having really bad gear was probably the final nail in the coffin. To say that I got my cheeks clapped is an understatement. They were simply too tough and ferocious for the party and I to deal with. So I have officially lost 1 out of 9 lives that I gave myself. I load back in, kill that singular mugging doofus again, and avoid the large group. I did find another bandit on a crumbled wall and I just couldn't help myself. I used Burst Strike and knocked him off of his little pedestal, ending him instantly. The rest of the journey was fairly uneventful, besides fighting my first group of snow harpies, which are basically reskinned harpies that have access to frost breath and seem a hair tougher than their standard cousins. As usual, fire works well, so we get by with minimal issues. After cooking up some fried wings, a single direwolf decided to drop by and say hello. Dire wolves are just as annoying as normal wolves, except they have white fur and are tougher. Same thing as the snow harpies, we fry up some mutt and continue on. So the location you have to reach is pretty noticeable as you'll spy a hill figure. The figure is of the Arisen, if only because it has that iconic scar across the chest. The party and I make our way there, meet the Fool, that's literally his name by the way, and speak to the Dragon Forged. He is only discernible by true Arisen. Well, Rock is an opposer, so he tells us a meeting of the slate. It has none and was only to get us to go over there and meet the weirdo. Cool, quest completed. I went ahead and accepted the quest Seeking Salvation, but more on that later. I forgot to mention that I picked up some other quests as well. I talked to Jasper for the eviction quest, if only because the man is damn near impossible to find when you really need him. After that, I talked to Mason, you know, the guy who pointed us to the Pawn Guild when we first entered Grand Soren. He seems to be a fellow who is also going after salvation. What's salvation? It's just another doomsday cult, you know, the usual. Mason gives me a bauble and tells me to go ask the citizens to hopefully find clues on where a meeting of salvations is taking place. Well, because my brain is sometimes like a coked up squirrel with ADHD, I talked to Jasper's family. His wife was understandably upset since they don't have much of a say in the matter of their eviction and asked to have another day to think on it. Their son, Pip, is a much different story. This little tyke has some fire in him and runs off after I tell him the news. I follow him and then have to do some parkour to get up to where he is, which is the roof of a barn or stable. He runs off again, which means I have to go find him again. This time he is under a bridge near the slums. Because he has the mental and emotional fortitude of Arisen, he runs once more. But instead of finding him again, I just have to grab the little rat before he accepts that this eviction is happening. I then make a little stop at the inn. I buy a few skills for Rock and Roll since they both don't have much. Rock gets Compass Slash, which will replace Broad Slash. My main reasoning is because Compass Slash can be used while you're under attack. Not great, but much better than just standing there and taking it like a man. Roll just gets the Beatitude Augment, which will increase the amount of time his curative spells stay up. I rest at the inn for a day and talk to Sarah. She agrees to move, but since Jasper is a lot like a certain ghost of a similar name, I decide I'm not going to search for him. So I find Fornival's Manor, jump on his dining table, and tell him I'll buy the property for a cool 80,000 gold. Thankfully, I have the money from selling the DLC gear that is barred from use. With all that done, the quest is complete. Time to do a little dungeon delving. The meeting that Salvation is having is being held in some old catacombs, which means more skelly boys and rotting meat sacks. We do encounter a new undead down here where the earth claims your soul. They're known as Stout Undead. These guys can be quite tough when you don't have some way of doing fire damage. As soon as these inflated meat sacks get lit on fire, they hiss and explode. While I can deal with them fairly easily, if and when Roll decides to be nice and give me Fire Boon, they can heavily damage party members or myself when they explode. Nothing much really changes in terms of strategy. I will go out of my way to take care of the Stout Undead first, but after they're gone, it's a free-for-all against walking, talking corpses. Speaking of enemies and the like, we come up against phantoms, or in other words, ghosts. They're a bit tricky to deal with since I have no magic attacks, and the only way for me to get magic damage is through Roll, who is too preoccupied trying to burn it with fire. However, they will possess a pawn or yourself and be open to physical attacks. The only issue with the tougher variants is they can heal themselves using your pawns or your own life force. Regardless, they die without too much struggle. We press onward, and I find some new robes for Roll. As much as I want him to show off those muscles, he definitely needs more defense. We finally make it close to the meet and hear some high-ranking member of Salvation preaching. I'd comment on how unhinged this man is, but considering I'm going through this game with mediocre armor, rusty weapons, and low-level support pawns, I don't have much room to talk. Instead of listening in on his whole charade, I jump down and he then sacrifices his followers to summon a pretty sizable group of undead. Not much to talk about with this fight since they're just basic undead that don't really pose a threat at this point. After the battle with the damned, we hear a familiar voice. It's our boy Mason, who seems to have cornered a member of Salvation. He gives us a choice, to spare this guy and let him run off, or kill him and silence him forever. There's not much that goes into the choice as far as I know, but I decided to kill him. To which Mason comes back surprised that I had the stomach to do for an unarmed man. Or in much simpler terms, he is surprised that I do something that is against the Geneva Convention. So much for being a true hero, I guess. With the quest nearly completed, I head back to Grand Soren with the use of the Eternal Fairy Stone. I know that I said DLC items wouldn't be used, but to be fair, this is basically just a quality of life item. Fairy Stones are normally used up anytime you fast travel. As the name suggests, the Eternal Fairy Stone has infinite uses. Once I'm back in town, I stop by Caxton's Armory and sell off some equipment that I found in the catacombs and get a nice 17,000 gold. I then go to the inn, deposit some materials that were weighing me down, and learn some more skills. Rock got the core skills Dire Onslaught and Takedown. These skills basically open up a couple of combos that will help increase my base damage output. No longer will I have to merely swing my sword around, like some raging ape. Rock also got Sheltered Spike and subsequently Sheltered Assault. It's one of the better skills for fighters since the ratio of stamina spent and damage dealt is decent. Roll was given the rest of his available augments. I go and report back to Sir Maximilian to get my reward for chasing the cult out of the catacombs. Next up is a Water God's Altar. The Faiths sent a small survey team to some altar that has been suffering from disuse because guess what? It's in the middle of nowhere. Before leaving Grand Soren, I decided to go to the Black Cat, which isn't what it sounds like. The Black Cat is a handy little business that provides gimmick gear and some materials you may or may not need. Well, in this case, I do need something from there, 5 trowels. Why would I need an oddly specific item? I need them to fully upgrade the shield to the highest extent this early into the game, which is 3 stars. Since rusty weapons provide some nice debilitations, this is the only way to acquire them at this point in time. In other words, my shield can now inflict poison and torpor, but only the shield. In order to get the sword to its max level, I need 4 chunks of Sorrow Stone, which most of it is located pretty far away from Grand Soren. I may be slightly confident after the upgrade, but I'm not foolish enough to attempt that right now. After I enhance my shield, I go and buy some more curatives because of the enemies I'll be facing within the altar. You'll see what I mean momentarily. I headed out onto the road and found a little area that housed a chest and got Roll a new piece of headgear, which makes him look a little funny, but at least he has a reason to look so angry all the time. Well, besides the steroids. After the small distraction, we encountered a nice-sized group of our favorite enemy. If you guessed bandits, you'll be wholeheartedly correct, and if you guessed it without skipping forward, you get a cookie. Bandits still put up some fight, they almost killed Rock roughly 3 times within this single encounter. The party and I got through it though, we just had to get thrown and slapped around like ragdolls in the process. Instead of heading straight to the altar, I make a detour to Cassius, to sleep at the end since it is cheap and relatively close by. Sleeping will grant all health back to the entire party and I need everyone in peak form. However, before I set out on the road, I pick up another quest. A soldier who's from our little fishing village hid from the dragon inside the well. He claims to have heard some disturbing noises coming from deeper within. Well, Rock is something of an investigator now, so why not go down there and see what all the fuss is about? It turns out our cowardly soldier wasn't lying about something being down here. And that means this is our first encounter with Saurians. Saurians are these bipedal, barely tribalistic lizards. They can be a bit of a tough foe if you don't know their weaknesses and resistances. So yeah, let's just say it's a good thing I decided to upgrade my shield because these scaly boys are immune to poison. While they may completely resist poison, they are vulnerable to ice and torpor, which means I can slow them down to a crawl while one of the magi use ice spells to deal some hefty damage. The only bad thing about being in this area is if you get drenched, your lantern will go out until you're dry, and fighting in the dark isn't the brightest of ideas, pun fully intended. But we're talking about the dream team here and we exterminate the oversized pests, then turn in the quest. Without any further distractions, we head on over to the altar. Once again we encounter bandits, but this is meant to happen and isn't the result of a random encounter. We saved a man who knows something about Salamit's grimoire. Some guy in Grand Soren was looking for the book himself and asked us to retrieve it for him. We'll probably do it at a later point, because the area we would need to go to is completely infested by bandits. As we near the altar, I must go and kill more of my kin. Okay, a little rant here. Why do fantasy games always have you fight goblins? The poor guys deserve a break from cross-dimensional genocide. I mean, look at them. They can't do any serious damage. One heartbreaking battle later, the team and I finally reach the entrance. Near the entrance is a man named Haslett, who was basically sent to check on the survey group, but considering he isn't much of a fighter, he decided to wait until more help arrives. The name of the place is almost quite literal since most of it is flooded. That means we have to fight some more Saurians while we make our way to get the lever for a lift that has been raised. Sometime later, the floor is covered in lizard gizzards, and we find the lever. Going back up, Rock slaps the thing where it's supposed to be and lowers the lift. This is where things can get a little tricky. The big thing about Saurians is they're capable of camouflaging themselves. If you're not paying attention, they can easily get the drop on you. Just keep your lantern lit, keep an eye out for any shimmering walls, and you'll easily spot them before they can lunge at you with their spears. If that wasn't bad enough, there are 2 skeleton magi that will attack you from afar. Your best bet is to take them out from range, but let's say you're like me and decided to go with a class without any ranged capabilities. Just bum rush them and they should be pretty easy to take care of. But of course our strider, Brendan, in his infinite wisdom, botched the jump to their platform and fell into the water. If a pawn goes into deep water, they'll be forfeit, or in other words, they'll basically die and you'll have to go back to a rift stone to resummon them. After all the fighting, I decided to open a chest. At that moment, Pasquale wanted to try to win my favor by attempting to show Brendan up. To sum up what happened, he was just as successful as Brendan and promptly fell into the water. I swear these pawns are basically hyper-aggressive lemmings with weapons. Oh well. With 2 of my pack mules gone, Roll and I go a little further. We find Brother Jean, or what's left of him, and find what killed him. It's a Cyclops with a larger-than-life club ready to turn us into his lair decor. I considered running for a moment, but I remembered that Roll has Levin, which is a lightning spell. Cyclops are weak to lightning spells and spells that stifle their strength. You can inflict torpor on them fairly easily, but they are pretty resistant to poison. Luckily, lightning spells can easily stun him, which gives me the opening I need to inflict a bit of poison and, more importantly, torpor. Throughout the fight, I do my best to keep torpor on him so he isn't much of a threat, while Roll continues to lob spells his way. We eventually whittle his health down enough to end his pitiful existence. After all the excitement dies down, I return to Hazlitt and tell him about Brother Jean. He then asks us to survey the ruins in Jean's stead. I do need the experience, so we'll do it, but I need a full team again. I head back to Grand Soren once more to check out any possible skills and gear. Anyway, I bought Rock some new iron bracers and battle greaves. I also take the time to upgrade them, which does cost a decent chunk of money, but that isn't their purchase price, so all's good. I head to the inn real quick and give Rock another augment, Prescience, which will make it easier to get perfect blocks on enemies. For Roll, I just get his core skills unlocked. After all of that mess, it's time to go searching for some new best friends. Everyone, I'd like you to meet a mage named Alessander and a strider named Joffrey. This is who we're going to roll with for now, until they disappoint me, then they'll have to be replaced like the others. With our new meat sacks, we return back to the altar. There we find a door with an indent on it and place a gem that we found on the Cyclops into the door. This is where we can drain the water so we can finally access the lower levels. With the water gone, we have a look around for some ancient slates. We only need to get 5 of them, but they're pretty damn heavy. The only things in our way are a few Saurians, some skeletons, and a couple of phantoms. Nothing we haven't dealt with before, so we get the slates with only moderate wounds. With our job basically done, we head back outside to Hazlitt, who is delighted that he'll be able to continue Brother Jean's work. He puts the slates on a cart and leaves. That means we can go back to Grand Soren to turn the quest in. We get 13,000 gold and level up 1 time. I head back to the inn to upgrade Skyward Lash to Heavenward Lash, then rest up for the next quest. The last task for this part of the game is to go and clear out a fort of goblins. Here we go again, committing mass goblin genocide because some guy in a seat of power said so. Anyway, the area can be pretty annoying to get through, if only due to a couple of cyclopes and some goblins on ballistas. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here, we still have to make the perilous journey to the fort. Before leaving Grand Soren, I enhanced Roll's gear a bit so he can take a little more punishment. Instead of heading straight for the quarry, I decided to go and pay those bandits that have Salamit's grimoire a little visit. I kind of regretted my decision when we got into combat with some bandits that were just standing around the area. They still do a bunch of damage, and it seems every fight I get into has me helplessly trying to defend myself against 2 fighters. You may be asking yourself why that would be a problem. Well, with the gear I've currently got, I'm not exactly much of a tank. They stagger and knock me down quite easily. The weight of armor messes with that as well. If you have light armor, you'll be able to typically move a little faster since you're not weighed down, but human enemies will be able to toss you around like pizza dough. The opposite is true of heavy armor, which tends to be mightily expensive. Several near-death experiences later, the party and I reach the camp that houses the grimoire. Well, the leader won't exchange it for any material items or work, so we do what we do best. We slaughter them without mercy. These bandits were actually fairly weak and pretty easy to get rid of. Afterwards, I search around for some loot and climb the tower, which has a chest with a grimoire in it. We finally got what we came for, time to head back to the capital. We give Stefan his fancy book and then stick around to restock some curatives. The way to the quarry was pretty uneventful. Encounters consist of just goblins, which take no time at all. Before entering the quarry, I search around for loot, mostly hoping I get lucky and find some armor, but no such luck for me today. We go on in and start exploring around. I find and stand on a large pressure plate which will open a door in front of us. It's kind of a good thing I decided to do that since I found a key to the quarry. This key will come in handy later. We push onward and fight yet another group of bandits. It may have been a pain due to my terrible armor, but we got through it nonetheless. I went ahead and opened a door which was near where the bandits were, and I'm greeted by bats. They died pretty easily. But of course we have some undead to fight off as well. It goes relatively smoothly, all things considered. There are a couple of ore veins sitting around, but sadly I'm not far enough away from Grand Soren to get that Sorrow Stone yet. After our disappointing mining job, we push forward and come across an ogre. Well, I have to get this door open by standing on the pressure plate, so I decided to attempt to get this big fella to open it for me, which didn't work out so well, but the door got opened anyway and I sprinted on through. I'm still not confident enough to fight one of them just yet. I came across a room of goblins that were hoarding some possible armor. Nope, just an adventurer's cloak and a large coin pouch. Oh well. We stumble upon another ogre, but thankfully we're near the end of the quarry. Before the big boy could aggro, we reach the exit and are finally on the other side. Since I'm here, I decide to check on a peddler that's nearby, so we head in the opposite direction of the fort and make it to a little rest camp. I can somewhat manage my inventory here and check out the goods this man has. What I can afford, I don't want, so we just head towards the fort. We make it there without too many issues. There's a soldier here that has a plan on what to do. He wants us to get in through this tunnel and open the door from the inside. But in reality, nothing is as easy as someone makes it out to be, because we have to find the lever to open the door. Well, it's not too hard to find since it is in the only other building in the area. That doesn't mean getting into the building isn't anxiety-inducing, as there is a Cyclops right there and 2 ballistas that are constantly firing explosive bolts at us. I could easily get wiped from the face of the earth. Luckily, nothing happened to me while I was climbing the ladder, and I got in. Not much in the way of enemies here, just a hobgoblin and a couple of other goblins. I find the lever and loot the other chest. RN Jesus finally answered my prayers, granting me a scale coat. It's not a huge improvement, but it's still better than the leather straps I was using at the time. With new armor equipped, I climbed back up where I had started, jump across the gap, slap that lever into its place, and open the gate. As soon as I get down there, it almost feels like an actual battlefield, complete with a big monster that wants to turn everything in its way into a finely ground up meat patty. For a majority of the fight, I primarily focus on the Cyclops since it is the biggest threat besides the ballistas. Eventually the goblins grow desperate and open up the fort, presumably to get more bodies out there to try and stop our advance. However, that backfired immediately since the party and I obliterated them with ease. We go up a staircase and find a large group of goblins plus another Cyclops, and instead of fighting everything, I just ran past them, as that Cyclops would only need to hit me once to kill me. I finally make it to the chieftain and we have a duel. He's a crafty little guy and tries to escape about halfway through the fight. Normally he's fast enough to truly escape, but I inflicted torpor on him, which gave me enough time to jump down, leave a splat on the ground, get up, and strike him some more. My victory was taken from me though, since a Cyclops decided to attack me, and killed the goblin in the process. We go back to Grand Soren and turn the quest in. The only thing left is to hear the Duke's directive. Since most of that is just a small series of cutscenes, I'll quickly sum up what matters. The Duke basically gave us more important jobs to do. Instead of going to Sir Maximilian for new quests, we go to Aldous. After the Duke tells us what we need to know, we leave. When we try to leave though, the game attempts to get us to talk to Eleanor. Sorry, but we have no time for any of that mess. We have jobs to do. The first jobs you're given by Aldous have to do with a trial and hunting a griffin. One is substantially more exciting than the other, as you could tell, but instead of doing either of them, I decided to attempt to look for Sorrowstone. I set on the path and came across our first chimera out in the wild, and boy is it more annoying than usual today. It keeps acting like it'll run off, but then comes straight back to us, which means I had to chase it down since the overgrown lemmings with me won't really do anything. It took a while to defeat it, mostly because my damage was the equivalent of smacking it with a pool noodle. I did at least get rid of the snake tail though, so that was a plus. I take a look at the map and realize I have gone the complete opposite direction that I should have. I'm already not in the most patient of moods, so I head back to Grand Soren, upgrade my scale coat, and head the right way. If the wasted time wasn't enough, it started to get dark. Nighttime in Dragon's Dogma can be a slight bit terrifying, especially in a run like this. Enemies are more numerous, and you can't exactly see super well, even with a lantern. With a large horde of snow harpies and dire wolves, you can tell when I decided it's not worth it to search any longer, so we noped out of there after the coast was clear. Back in Grand Soren, I sleep and finally start the jobs Aldous gave me. Of course, I hold off on doing anything with a trial. You could think of it as something akin to jury duty, but more dull since there are large monsters that need slaying. I join up with a small hunting team and we start going to the ambush spot that someone picked out. I don't know who picked it out, but we seem a little too close to Grand Soren for safety reasons. Of course, in order to properly hunt the griffin, you need bait. Except we didn't bring a villager or kettle with us, which means we have to use goblins. Sorry, little guy, I need your body more than you do. I grab the dead goblin and gingerly put him down in the circle. Now we wait. Surprisingly, it takes very little time for the griffin to fly over here. I did a little pre-planning for this fight since I know I'm not going to be able to do enough damage to finish it off myself. So I equipped to roll with fire spells. High angle, high combustion, and fire affinity. I also gave him Dark Boon since griffins take 100% relative damage from dark spells. They're pretty resistant to everything else save slashing and bashing damage. The griffin eventually swoops down and we have to fight him for a while. I occasionally grab onto it so it can't escape Rock's wrath. Eventually though, the griffin flies off, which means we must go to the Blue Moon Tower. We head back to Grand Zorn and I get one of the better fighter skills in the game, Legion's Bite. It has some fairly nice iframes which will allow me to attack without taking damage. Sadly, that doesn't mean I can fight an ogre since he'll still be able to grab me. Regardless, it should make encounters more manageable. We start walking to the tower only to end up fighting a group of snow harpies and dire wolves together, which has to be one of the worst combinations for low-level pawns to fight. To say the party was knocked down a few times is a bit of an understatement. We eventually kill everything though and move forward. We come across the Wind-Worn Valley, which has a unique, albeit annoying aspect to it. Wind is pretty bad here, as the name kinda suggests, and it makes it difficult to cross through the terrain. Sprinting is your best bet, but it drains stamina and it's slow to a crawl. Jumping is completely out of the question since it makes it easier for the wind to displace you. Oh, and you have harpies ready to harass you on the way. After that little jaunt, we come to a canyon infested with bandits. Oh boy, here we go again. Wanting a bit of extra XP, I try to fight the bandits, but they're way too numerous and too tough to actually get through. So I ran and left the party behind. As you have probably guessed, everyone ended up dying, so I have to get them back from a rift stone. Thankfully, the Blue Moon Tower has one right outside the front entrance. I decided to attempt the climb and fight with some other pawns that may prove more useful. Meet Kendall and Augusta. They'll probably die in 5 minutes. We enter the tower and find 2 members of the hunting party who tell us everyone else is fighting deeper within. We continue on and have some bony boys to fight. Oh, hey, Kendall died. Huh, guess I'll have to get another one. Yeah, as you can tell, they're a little tougher than the others we have crushed underneath our boots. They also have more numbers and better positioning than previously, which makes this scuffle drag on much more than it should. But I'm nothing if not moderately persistent. So after the first 2 or 3 groups, I just run past them. Now comes the part where I must open the gates to let everyone through. It's pretty easy since all you have to do is break the first one, walk around to open the second one, and wait for the griffin to open the way for you. As we're running, Augusta and Sorrel both fall to their deaths. Well, nice knowing you all for roughly 30 minutes. The party is down to just rock and roll, the true dream team. We climb up to the roof and steel ourselves for a fight. A little ways into the fight, Stefan came running up and used Salamet's Grimoire against the griffin. Good thing griffins are weak to fire. I'd grabbed onto the griffin before he popped in, and that caused me to be thrown off the griffin and smacked directly into the ground. Thanks, Stefan. Regardless, we fight a while longer and eventually kill the griffin. I of course take the opportunity to loot the surrounding area. I'm not a madman. Well, maybe. I don't know anymore. Even though I really didn't want to, I did decide to put the incognito mask on Rock since it will boost his defenses, if only minimally. We head back to Grand Zorn to hurry up and gather evidence for the trial. Since I know I didn't give specifics on the trial itself, I'll quickly tell you what's going on. Everyone's favorite local rich guy, Fornival, is being tried for having ties to Salvation or something like that. Well, I don't really care what happens to him since I never buy anything from him anyways. The only truly unique item he has for sale is the Maker's Finger, which is an arrow that can one-shot anything. Well, not anything, but most creatures. However, I'm not going to use it for this run because you can only use it once. What would be the point? Anyway, I gather the evidence, submit it, sleep in Cassardus for a few days, and head back to the capital. Looks like old Fornival is being thrown in the dungeons. The next couple of jobs Aldous has for us entail hunting down a thief and helping Sir Mercedes with an issue that has arisen in Windbluff Tower. First up, the thievery. From the information Aldous and the others have provided, it seems someone snuck into the Duke's castle and yoinked something powerful from the Duke. No one really told me about the power of the item itself, so you'll also have to sit in the dark for a bit. Anyway, we go around and ask a few people about who the suspect might be. So far, the number one suspect is Salamet, since he is the only one known to have an interest in magical baubles. After learning his name, we ask around some more about his possible location, in which someone says a person in strange dress was seen at the quarry. Well, we've got our first stop, time to head over there. Nothing fantastic or jaw-dropping on our way in, just some goblins. We make it into the quarry and he's just standing there with a large group of friends. As you could guess, we initiated combat with him and his crew of goons. We win, but Salamet quickly escapes, so we head back to the capital and report back to Aldous. With us having reported to him, he suggests we continue our search for Salamet. So we question someone in the market area and they tell us Salamet has gone to the Blue Moon Tower. Well, good thing I put a port crystal down over there. We fast travel over there and make our way through. The bandits aren't nearly as bad as the ones that were in the canyon. They still give me a run for my money, but I can at least take them out. I do decide to be careful and follow the dilapidated path that the Griffin left. If I went the other way, there would be bandits waiting to ambush the party and I. We get up to the roof for the second time and have to fight Salamet himself. If Rock had a vocation with range capabilities, this fight would be terribly easy. But alas, here we are playing some weird version of Peekaboo with a spell-slinging mage. He is one of possibly a few enemies with the ability to teleport. Too bad it won't protect him forever. This fight is basically a slight test of endurance. You have to kill the bony boys, and then you have to kind of target him, which can be a little difficult to do since he's bouncing all over the place like a damn ping pong ball. And well, Salamet will also cast spells at you in the party, so just be aware of your surroundings if you can help it. Of course, he doesn't just summon skeleton warriors and other goofy stuff like that. He will summon one skeleton lord, which, I'll be honest, I was moderately scared of. This boy is tanky and does some decent damage on top of it. But we make it through that fight and I start chasing Salamet down. He's pretty weak as you would expect from a mage and falls quickly. With Salamet gone, we pick up the ring and head back to Grand Soren. Now I do have a choice here. I could stop at the Black Cat and create a forgery of the ring, keeping the real one for myself, or give it back to the Duke. The good thing about keeping the ring is the fact that it makes it so any vocation that has access to magic can intone spells faster than usual. It's not a huge amount faster, but it is still incredibly helpful if given to roll or a support pawn. Or I could simply give the ring over. After thinking on it for a bit, I felt it was a tiny bit too cheesy to take the real one for myself and return to the Duke's castle to give his ring back. On to the next job. Before doing anything else, I go ahead and upgrade Legion's Bite to Dragon's Maw, which gives the ability more range. The next job is basically nothing too special. Sir Mercedes is going to some little encampment of her own volition to investigate the claims that there's some unrest at the garrison. When we turn up there sure is some unrest. Soldiers attacking one another, stuff on fire, and Mercedes is running up ahead. We catch up to her and she decides to fight Lord Julian in a duel. Rock isn't the most patient man and slaughters Lord Julian before the fight truly begins. Time to return and inform Aldous that we have quelled the rebellion. The next thing to do is to go to the Southern Way Castle. Why? Aldous didn't give me specifics. He said it was urgent and sent me on my way. I just so happen to know what I'm going to fight next, so I make some light preparations in the form of curatives. Most notably some Mithridate and Secret Softener, since the enemy I'll be fighting has a pretty good chance at inflicting poison as well as the ability to petrify everyone. Hot tip from yours truly, if you don't cure petrification in time, you will die. Which thankfully didn't happen while I was recording this particular clip, but we do still have the end area to deal with. Anyway, I also decided to equip Roll with some lightning spells since the enemy will take extra damage from it. With all preparations made, we head to the Way Castle. I of course took the Cassardus route since it will be a little safer and means I won't take a bump in my stock of curatives. All that's on the way are the usual wolves, goblins, and bandits, nothing major. We make it to the Way Castle and are stopped by a soldier who tells us we need to go back to Aldous immediately. Okay, time to...
Hey, you're finally awake.
Huh, that was weird. Anyway, we make it back to Grand Soren and good gravy, that's a big cock. Immature jokes aside, we must fight the cockatrice. Yeah, this boy is packing immunity to a nice amount of debilitations, which means my bonuses are absolutely useless, since he is immune to poison and torpor. Looks like we'll be relying on brute strength and rolls lightning spells. Now keep in mind, for this fight you don't need to kill it, only chase it off, or let it destroy all of the tributes. But what's the fun in wasting an opportunity to test our mettle against such a beast? I attack the cockatrice for a bit, and Sorrel gets turned into a statue. Why does every battle seem to be so tragic when one or more party members become forfeit? It's like Rock is cursed to watch his companions die over and over. Focus is maintained on the cockatrice until the traitor makes his presence known. Rock has developed a bit of a bloodthirst and doesn't want to hear unnecessary chatter in the middle of battle, so Rock obliterates him after a few uses of Dragon's Maw. After that, it's time to turn our attention to our large flighty friend. It's still quite healthy and not much really happens. It's more of the same. Evading, climbing, attacking, etc. until it flies off. Still, the disgusting bird did a number on us. Sorrel died and our curative stocks are a little low. Augusta was only knocked unconscious, but because she kept spamming Dark Boon, I decided I'm not going to pick her up. We return to Aldous, who is a little busy berating himself for allowing this to happen. He commends our bravery in attempting to keep the tributes intact and gives us another job from the Duke. Sounds like he wants to send us on an expedition for some reason, possibly to get aid for defeating the dragon. But before he sends us off, he gives us gifts in the form of a nice chunk of gold, a paladin's mantle, a badge of merit, and the golden bastard. A soldier comes running in and tells us that Salvation has taken over a stronghold, which means they're likely planning to weaken the various garrisons around the continent so the dragon could raise the entire thing with ease. We have our next job to do. However, before I march all the way up there, I have some more prepping to do. I go to the inn and change Rock's vocation to Assassin. It's a hybrid vocation that allows for the use of swords, shields, daggers, and bows, which will give Rock a little more wiggle room in fights. Since I got Vehemence, I'll dish out a little more damage because most of the classes rely on physical damage to a degree. The only issue is I'm going to need to grind out a few vocation ranks. Thankfully, we know of a couple of places where we can do just that. You may notice that all the support pawns are forfeit. That's actually fine with me. I'm sure Rock and Roll could easily get through this no problem. Now, the one thing I haven't really done in this challenge run is a lot of side questing. Mostly because a majority of the side quests just amount to killing something, finding something, or escorting someone. But more on that later. So what do I plan on doing? Kind of bounce around from place to place and fight anything that decides to look at me wrong. Yep, Rock isn't happy after the cockatrice got away. I actually kind of feel worried about the guy. He seems to be getting more and more violent as time passes. Probably just stress. The first notable fight out in the wild was with some sulfur saurians. Overall tactics are like their standard cousins. Aim for the tail and you'll be able to deal with them fairly easily. However, there is one pretty big thing that differs between them. Sulfur saurians are pretty resistant to frost damage, which means if you just stumbled upon these guys out in the wild and thought they were exactly like a normal one, you'd be in for a rude awakening. With these guys, the resistances are flipped, meaning they're weak to fire. That is to say, Roll and I erased them off this earth. We do eventually fight more of them, but that's because sulfur saurians have a chance of dropping a yellow poison sac. Sounds gross and it probably is, but it is extremely helpful since getting a couple of them will get the daggers to level 3. Which, you know what that means. If you don't, take a look at the title again. Or Rock and Roll both will show up at your doorstep and slap you with a warm stick of butter. I did grab 1 or 2 more poison sacs just to be safe and press on. The next notable encounter in the wild was a large group of goblins and a cyclops. As you can imagine, it's a pretty easy encounter. Although the sheer size of the goblin horde almost put Rock into an early grave. Still, it's just goblins and a big boy with a big club and some armor. Nothing that can't be handled with a little work, especially since Roll has lightning spells. After that, since it was pretty close by, I decided to go to the catacombs. It's a nice controlled environment, which means I know what to expect out of it. So we enter and kill the undead there for a second time. I also tried to loot as much as possible because the loot had been reset, mostly so Rock could hopefully get some better pants for free since the ones he currently has are the best that we can buy. I did encounter a slight snag while in the catacombs, however, and I decided to head back to Grand Soren to escape the hell that is a group of skeletons. I want to say a nice majority of the difficulty was due to the low vocation rank, but it's more than likely a skill issue on my part. Anyway, I made it back to the capital, and the first thing I did was upgrade my daggers to level 3 so they can actually be moderately useful in battle. I stop at the inn, manage my inventory a bit, and then get some more skills to help out in combat. The skills I settled on were Moving Castle, Biting Wind, Toss and Trigger, Tusk Toss, Triad Shot, Keen Sight, Puncture Dart, and subsequently Skewer Dart, the Dagger and Bow based core skills, and finally the Watchfulness Augment. Afterwards, I rest at the inn and head to Cassardus. Seems there's more trouble on the well, and you can guess what's down there. It's more Saurians. So I make a small detour to the encampment and hook roll up with some better ice spells so the fight can go by a hell of a lot quicker. We then get back to Cassardus and head down into the well. This time, instead of a cowardly soldier, we have a villager that came down here to drink a little bit of liquid courage and peace. This time, the goal is slightly different. We have to completely exterminate the lizards, which includes the eggs. At this point, I might as well start an extermination service. Anyway, we do what good exterminators do, and we make sure to eliminate all of the lizards, then destroy their eggs. I then go back to the surface and find just the guy I was looking for. It's Reynard, who just so happens to have some goodies for me to buy. I primarily went to him to buy a rusted bow, but he had a bunch of other rusted tetanus-riddled weapons, and I decided to buy them as well. Good grief, you go to a store for one item and end up buying most of their stock. Just the way the world works, I guess. I go ahead and deposit the items into storage so I don't have to move at the pace of a geriatric snail with arthritis. I want to upgrade the bow, so I go back to Grand Soren and head to our favorite legitimate business, the Black Cat, to buy some more trowels. We need 5 to unlock the bow's full potential. With the trowels bought, we go and upgrade the bow. After that, I head to the inn to get another skill. I just upgraded Biting Wind to its next level and then rested to head out once more. I'm attempting to at least have a vocation rank of 5 before attempting to take back the fort from Salvation. The next place I want to go is the Everfall. It's pretty much within Grand Soren and has plenty of enemies for me to test my skills and weapons on. So we go through it the short way, which means we get to fight some bats and undead. But the battle I've been wanting to attempt is against the ogre. My best advice for this fight is to do your utmost to inflict it with torpor, which we easily did since the bow's pretty damn good at proccing debilitations. It turns a fight into a cakewalk so long you have a rusty weapon at level 3. All you have to do is primarily target the head when possible and keep an eye on your surroundings. At some point it'll die and you'll be free to move on. We go further down and eliminate more undead, then get out since there aren't really any more enemies here. I teleport to Cassardus to grab some quests so I can kind of passively get money as well as a small boost in XP. I then do the same thing at the encampment that's nearby. Since one of the quests wants me to kill some skeleton knights over at the Blue Moon Tower, Roll and I head over there. We find a few snow harpies and some bony boys. The bow kind of trivializes some of the fights, but to be fair, in a normal playthrough, I'll default to Strider and then either go for Ranger or Magic Archer. I'm simply more comfortable with it, I guess. But at some point, Roll gets into some deep water and promptly becomes forfeit. In response to that, I kill 2 harpies and head back to Grand Soren as I have reached the 5th vocation rank. I summon Roll once again, then head to the inn to get some more skills. I picked up Reset, Easy Kill, and Advanced Trigger. Now we're ready to face Salvation's forces and can hopefully put a stop to them once and for all. Before we slap Salvation with a flip-flop like an angry Hispanic mother, we need to get a new crew together. Even though it seems redundant at this point due to the fact that most enemies can one-shot our friends, Rock and Roll both feel a little lonely at times. So we go to the Rift and recruit a mage named Jace and a strider named Carney. Time to hit the road. Well, that's what I would be saying if I wasn't a dipstick that forgot to buy some curatives and give Roll some skills that are better suited to the fights we'll quickly find ourselves in. Now that all the preparation is done, the party and I venture forth to hopefully get that fort back from Salvation. On our way there, we come across some bandits. These ladies aren't exactly your standard varieties since they are a little tougher and aren't as easily debilitated. Luckily for us, they're still not the strongest foes in the game and we can deal with them with only a little difficulty. Then we have to fight a Cyclops. Not much trouble as usual, so we eliminate the big guy fairly easily. We of course have to fight more bandits because what else would be roaming around in the middle of nowhere? We make it to a mountain path, fight more bandits and another Cyclops. You know, it'd be nice if the game gave me at least a slight challenge. Anyway, at the top of this path is the female bandit camp, and you know what that means. We slaughter them without mercy, like the group earlier in the video. However, they are tougher and they do come close to killing Rock, although that was mostly due to my terrible placement as a mage blasted my ass to the moon and back. With the winches dealt with, I open the gate, loot their stuff, and continue on. Since it is now properly dark out, that means skeletons are going to pop up and harass us as we try to make our way to our destination. That's not even the worst news, since a chimera wants to play a quick game of cat and mouse. Little does it know, it's the mouse. In all seriousness, this fight was a bit of a pain because there were still skeleton magi in the area and it's dark as hell even with the lantern on. We turned the hunter into prey and continued walking. We stumbled upon some dire wolves and fought most of them off, but seeing as we were really close, I decided to book it and leave everyone behind. Don't worry, most of us made it. Since Carney wasn't good at her job, I stopped by the rift to go and get a new companion to fill the role. Meet Christopher. That has to be one of the strangest spellings of that name I have ever seen. No offense to any Christophers watching this video. Okay, time to head in and oh boy, that's a lot going on. We've got a large group of snow harpies and 2 cyclopes ready to turn us into mincemeat. I wouldn't suggest fighting such a large group of enemies normally, but what would be the fun in running away? It takes a bit of time, but we murder everything and move deeper into the fort. Next up we have some skeletons which can easily drag us into the ground with them. They love to block, so I use cutting wind to my advantage since it can get them out of their defensive stance, leaving them open to being obliterated. We find a captured soldier and he gives me a bottle of Harspud milk, which is pretty mediocre, but hey, I'm not going to say no to free curatives. Next up, I destroy a crumbling wall, eradicate some undead who were chilling out in the room, and go down a staircase only to see a large group of undead, some members of Salvation, and some soldiers who are trapped. With Rock being the hero that we all strive to be, the party saved the soldiers, and the soldiers immediately showed us gratitude by showering us with gifts. If only everyone else was this grateful. We continue forward and had to fight another chimera. This is a mandatory fight, and someone decided to have several ballistae in the room. I don't use them because it feels lazy, although I'm 90% sure I would have drawn the oversized cat's aggro and at least one of them would be destroyed. Still, the fight isn't that hard. I typically focus on the tail first so it can't poison anyone, which usually causes the chimera to fall over. After focusing down the tail, I start attacking the goat since it has the ability to use magic. Once the goat has been permanently silenced, there's only one target left, and that's the lion. The lion is a little tough, but since all it can do is physical damage, it isn't anything to write home about. It's also weak to magic, so yeah, it gets destroyed rather easily. We fight some more of the same enemies we've seen for this quest, and then come across a skeleton lord. This is unlike the first time we encountered one since we are in an enclosed area with him. Speaking of which, the guard that was in here was the first to fall. Rest in peace, you poor bastard. Unlike the guard, we manhandled the skeleton with relative ease and pushed on through. Now this one part of the quest is the reason I took the assassin vocation, because I need ranged capabilities to deal with the wights. The best way for me to describe what they're like in layman's terms, think skeleton magi but tougher with the ability to fly. Or really, if you want to get down into the nitty-gritty details, they're basically a lich. And we have 2 of them to get rid of. The bad thing with this fight is my terrible damage output and the fact that they resist most debilitations. They can be torpid, however, it just takes time to proc. While we have 2 wights flying around, like out-of-season Halloween decorations, we also have undead and a variety of skeletons to fight off, including skeleton magi, which will heal the wights when possible. Luckily for us, most of the skeletons are pretty squishy. Guess they didn't drink enough milk in life. But that does mean we need to try to focus on both groups of enemies at the same time for the sake of efficiency, which doesn't always work out since a skeleton partially healed a wight. Despite the slight challenges, we defeat both wights and can take a breath as all that is next is a cutscene. The leader of Salvation is a nutcase as usual, go figure, and immediately gets crushed by the dragon. I gotta thank him for shutting the Elysian up. The guy was starting to grate my nerves. Anyway, the dragon came all this way to properly challenge me to a fight to the death. Well, Seeing as we've killed many Cyclopes, an ogre, a griffin, 2 wights, and chased off a cockatrice, we don't have much else to do. The dragon sends us to the Dragon Forge to get some more information. With all of that said, the dragon leaves and we exit the fort. Well, it's more of we escaped the fort because it started to crumble as soon as the dragon flew away, but you get what I mean. With all the fighting that we've done, we have a nice chunk of discipline, and I checked to see what new skills can be acquired. Thankfully, there's a guy here that will teach us some new skills, so I go and grab Forward Roll, Double Vault, Antler Toss, Full Bend, and Mighty Bend. Roll got some new skills as well: Dark Affinity, High Halidom, and Levitate. With our goal ahead of us, I fast traveled to Grand Soren to stock up on some more curatives for the travel and eventual fight with Grigori. We stop by the apothecary and buy some stuff, most notably large mushrooms for stamina management, smother sap to cure catching fire, interventive for curing most physical debilitations, and panacea for the healing capabilities as well as the debilitation curing. I possibly went a little overboard by buying more than I likely needed, but I can't be too careful since I need to go through some dangerous areas to even get to the dragon in the first place. While I'm in town, I head to the inn to set some better skills for roll since I know what's ahead. Let's just say fire spells aren't going to be the most helpful things in the world at this point. Roll is set up with Dark Affinity, High Frigor, Holy Affinity, High Anodyne, High Halidom, and High Spell Screen. I then rest up and head out to be the Dragon Forged. On our way there, the party and I encounter a Chimera, which honestly was killed rather quickly this time around. I'm starting to like and appreciate this ragtag team. Is it the perfect setup? Far from it, but they perform fairly well given the circumstances. After putting the kitty down for a little dirt nap, we meet up with the Dragon Forged. He basically gave us a dragon leather vest, a copy of Draconian Strategy Volume 1, and gave us good luck. With that out of the way, I fast travel to Grand Soren one more time for some last minute inventory management and to restock a couple of curatives. I also stop by the inn to give Roll one more skill, the Inflection Augment, which will have the severity of wounds when Roll is intoning spells. I then sleep so night won't creep up behind me while we travel. With all preparations complete, it's time to hit the road. I'll admit, the entire trip had my anxiety through the roof. I was mostly worried if I packed enough curatives for the road and the fight with the dragon. If I didn't have enough curatives, I or my party members would surely fall to the dragon, if not whatever beasts lurk within the path to it. But more on that when we get to it. In our way are some bandits, dire wolves, a couple of cyclopes, a chimera, and snow harpies. Nothing we haven't faced before. All it takes is a little bit of work and perseverance. Before you know it, we reach the Great Wall. As much as I want to get to kicking the dragon to Kingdom Come, I enhance my thick fur greaves, buy some mushrooms, do some more inventory management, and then rest so everyone is at full HP. Now it's time to make way to the dragon. This hellhole is not a fun place to be when you're under-equipped and have low-level support pawns in tow. For those of you who have a memory span greater than a walnut, you will see that this area is where the tutorial takes place. Yep, it's got much stronger enemies this time around. Geosaurians are the first to make an appearance. These guys are tanky and love to ambush, just like all the rest. But we are in an area with a nice cliff face, so if you wish to fight them, all you have to do is knock them down and throw them to the abyss. The next enemy to show their face are succubi. They're basically much stronger harpies with a new little twist. They can lower your strength rather than put you to sleep. Their shrieks are also capable of blinding. If you're playing along for some crazy reason, the best strategy I can suggest is to knock them out of the sky and inflict torpor on them. They don't really resist poison either, so they can be made much more manageable. After the first group of succubi, the party and I continue on and fight some more Geosaurians. Except they kicked everyone in the teeth like donkeys. With the threat of multiple lizards, I have to run forward. We then run into more succubi and some hellhounds. Hellhounds are perhaps the most annoying variation of the wolven enemies. They can cast fireballs, knock you down, and instead of mauling you, they drag you. Luckily, I didn't have it happen to me this time around, but trust me, when you give wily wolves range capabilities, they become pretty noticeable nuisances. It didn't help that Jace and Christopher both ended up falling here. With less party members, I have less damage output for the fight with the dragon, and this caused me to panic a bit. So I ran ahead with the hopes that Roll will follow. Thankfully he did, but we ran right into the Gore Chimera. It's basically your standard Chimera, but beefed up a decent bit with the ability to insta-kill as well as an ability to heal and regrow its tail. So what I decide to do is focus the goat down. It's pretty easy to stagger while it intones spells, and that means I can basically bully it into submission. When the goat finally dies, I aim for the snake. Its spit is a hell of a lot more dangerous than the standard ones. In all honesty, it fell quicker than I thought it would, but hey, I'm not complaining. After that whole mess, we have to stand on some pressure plates to open the door forward. So here's a bit of info before the fight. The dragon kidnaps your beloved. Who's Rock's beloved, you ask? Why, none other than Sir Maximilian? Well, that's a bit unexpected, but it makes sense due to the way that the beloved mechanic works. The dragon offers a choice: to sacrifice my beloved and live as the Duke of Granzus, or fight him, keep my beloved, and gain my heart back. Well, we made it this far. I'm not about to turn away like a coward. So we start the fight with Grigori. At first, he's chasing us through a large hall and then promptly gets stuck in the doorway like a questionable video on an adult website. Yeah, let's just say my damage output is at an all-time low with this fight. Grigori has 9 whole health bars and resistance to a bunch of debilitations. Well, except poison, it seems. But since my support pawns are gone, it's just rock and roll fighting this Giga Chad of a Dragonoff. Seriously, props to the voice actor, he did an amazing job for this role. My main strategy is to stay a fair distance away and chip away his health with the bow. The reason why is basically just for safety reasons. It takes a while, but I eventually whittle him down to about half of his first health bar, prompting him to fly away. After that, it's just some running, and we eventually reach a tower with 3 ballistae on top of it. The use of a ballista is required to shoot Grigori out of the sky, which means he tries to ram us, but little does he realize we're tiny compared to him, so Rock jumps onto his back and climbs close to his heart. During this entire thing, I have to try to stay on while he flies around. I'm sorry, but this entire section is just badass as hell. Dragon's Dogma has to be one of the only games that made a fight with a dragon feel like you're fighting a frickin' dragon. Anyway, eventually the dragon shakes Rock off after some attacks, but that doesn't mean we're out of the fight just yet. In a cutscene, Rock passes by the dragon's heart and basically stunned him in midair. The pair plummet to the ground, and this is where the real fight begins. Now the fight is a long and tedious process of trying to kill him. It's not really that bad on a normal playthrough, but my damage is basically that of a toothpick. In other words, I barely scratch him. I mean, just look at that health bar. It's enormous. I'm definitely going to be here for a while. While I do my best to damage him, I also have to watch out for his attacks. He's got a nice list with a fairly noticeable windup, except some spells which seem to just pop off almost as soon as he raises his hand. The most notable attacks this early on are his multiple fire breath attacks as well as his grab attack. If he grabs the Arisen, he'll just splat them into the ground. If he grabs a pawn, however, he'll try to convert them to be a temporary ally. However, he has a little bit of a weakness when he has a pawn in hand. It takes a bit to brainwash them, and if you just so happen to have a bow on you, you can shoot his finger-like appendages with a strong shot, causing him to drop the pawn and reel back momentarily. But let's say you're unlucky and he manages to convert one of your companions. Well, all you have to do is give them a panacea and either do a decent amount of damage to them or inflict a debilitation, and they'll return back to normal. If you haven't noticed yet, you'll see that I target his heart for a majority of the fight. To be blunt, that's just his weak spot. It's fairly easy to hit from range or with melee if you manage to clamber up to it. After what feels like a hot minute, I finally chip him down to his second health bar. In this case, he'll fly off and attack from a distance. Too bad for him, he can't escape Rock's burning hatred. You can try to use a ballista to knock him down, but I rarely manage to hit him before he hits me and destroys it. I have some good news though. He'll get bored and fly off from the heightened position and attempt to perform a strafing run. But much like when he grabs a pawn, this attack has a nice long windup. As soon as you see the hellfire ready to be released from his mouth, you can shoot him in the face and knock him out of the sky with a strong bow shot. When he falls to the ground, he is momentarily stunned, giving you the perfect opportunity to smack his heart around like an abusive ex. He takes more damage when he's struggling like that, and it's noticeable with his pitiful damage output. After that, it's more of the same. Dodge his attacks, attack him from range, do your best to stun him, and pray to whatever gods you believe in. If you pay enough attention to his attacks, you'll get him down to his third to last health bar. This is where he has some new attacks to play around with, which of course are heavily telegraphed. He has what I personally like to call a nuke attack, which consists of a big blast and a few smaller ones accompanying it. It's not that hard to dodge, but you still want to be doing your best to be careful. The next notable one is when it looks like he is crouching. He's actually getting ready to use his holy spell, which can do some decent damage. Your best bet is just to run out of the circle. Another one that isn't hard to get away from, but could easily ruin your day, like kicking the hell out of a refrigerator whilst barefooted. Trust me, I know. Keep up the dodging as well as the damage, and you'll turn him into putty. I do encourage you to use curative somewhat sparingly because his fire breath can roast you and cause you to catch on fire. After about an hour of battle total, you'll have defeated him. That doesn't mean the run is finished though, since there's more content after fighting the dragon. But before we get too far into that, I'll tell you what goes on in the cutscene. The dragon honors his end of the deal. You get your heart back, but there's a slight cost that he did not mention, explicitly. The Dragon Forge gets Thanos snapped out of existence, the Duke turns old and gray, Grand Soren has a large gaping hole where the inn and market once stood, and the sky looks like England at the height of the Industrial Revolution. You may be wondering why the Duke and the Dragon Forge were affected, and the simple answer is their fates were tied to the dragon, just as yours was. Age caught up to the both of them, because once the dragon takes your heart, you're immortal. But if a significant amount of time were to pass and the dragon dies, you'd either turn into dust like the Dragon Forged, or a shriveled up old raisin like the Duke. Which also implies the Duke was once an Arisen and gave up his beloved to become Duke, either because he was power hungry or felt inadequate to face the dragon. Grigori leaves the Arisen with some ominous words. In my death, you've won a future for this world, but what that future spells for you, for all men, is a truth you'll find staring back from this world's utmost depths. Your reward for killing the dragon is saving your beloved, as well as getting some strong weapons that match what you used to defeat him. Oh, and all of your equipped gear is Dragon Forged in the process. I meant to kill him with the sword equipped, but oh well. I'm not going back through that hell again just to get my rusted sword to inflict both poison and torpor. With the dragon dead, I can rest a little bit, and the first thing I decide to do is manage my inventory. Mostly dropping off items that are hogging up some space, and then it's time to get ready for the trip to Grand Soren. So I had planned to show off the new enemies. I simply stepped outside of Cassardus and then got put in my place by some grim goblins. I didn't die thankfully, but let's just say this is a taste of what's to come. Instead of trying to get my support pawns back and set Roll's skills at the encampment, I opted to just fast travel to Grand Soren once Roll fell on combat. Since the inn is gone, I have to go to the Pawn Guild to manage my inventory and skills. That actually doesn't bother me because that means I'm right there anytime I fast travel. I go ahead and get 2 skills, 100 Kisses and Wind Harness. Then I managed Roll's skills. The guard outside told me to go see the Duke. Well, the Duke is none too pleased to see me. That's because he believes I took the dragon's bargain to usurp his seat of power. This isn't the first time I've had to rough up an old man. So I fight him, win, and kick his old ass through a window. Now, of course, some guards come in at a really bad moment, and the Duke orders Rock to be arrested for committing the crime of treason. Which means it's time to run for it. With the entirety of Grand Soren's guards gunning for that promotion, we have no choice but to get knocked down into the abyss that was conjured by the dragon's demise. I end up missing the first ledge and have to wait until I hit what looks to be the bottom. I begin falling again and finally cling onto the ledge. There's a pawn named Quincy who tells me I need to collect wake stones. I never brought this up earlier due to wake stones being fairly rare pre-dragon, but they basically allow you to cheat death and continue right from the spot you died. Don't worry, I won't be using them for that. Not just because I feel like it goes against the purpose of this run, but it's also due to the fact that I need to find a nice amount of them. Which brings me to what we have to get through to get these stones. That is the Everfall, in its true form. The Everfall is an incredibly harsh place, but you can find wake stones really easily. However, there is a barrier of entry that you must get through first. The Evil Eye. The Evil Eye is a slight pain on a mediocre day and a downright nightmare for this particular run, which is due to one of its spells, which basically acts as a dispel for any magic-based bonuses such as Holy Affinity. Holy damage just so happens to be its biggest weakness besides physical attacks. However, physical attacks are generally useless until you get rid of all of its tentacles. because this bad boy also comes equipped with a shield. And you either have to wait until it's attacking or until you can get rid of all the tentacles. Did I mention this disgusting sewer-loving meatball can also regenerate all those tentacles? Yep, after trying for a while, I wasn't making much progress. So it's time to go to the drawing board, which means that this run will be void. In order to get on with the production of this video, I'm going to need some actual support pawns, not ones that are merely level 10. Then again, you could probably argue the validity of an addendum. It wasn't included in the original set, so by that alone, the run may not be considered void by some. Regardless, it's something I'll have to scrap probably for the rest of the game, which is my fault for attempting to bite off more than I could chew. We're already this far, I'm not quitting just yet, only leveling the playing field. I quickly gather a new team. This time my support pawns consist of a fighter and a sorcerer that match my level. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Callister and Manning. Both of them mostly fit in terms of drip. Well, except Manning, he's a little overdressed. These are likely the last pawns I'll recruit, so they're here to stay, until they disappoint me. Anyway, before we get to the fight with the angry Italian meatball, we need some curatives. Since it loves to magically stifle skills, we're going to need light cures, panaceas, and the like. However, I have to manage everyone's inventory. Roll, for example, can't hold all the light cures meant for him on top of everything else. So I keep them on rock to give them to roll whenever needed. I also go ahead and give everyone large mushrooms and a bunch of harspud sauce, because I plan on going in there and ending that giant eyeball's pointless existence. Guess it's a good thing I decided to go relatively cheap on my armor, since buying all of those curatives took a little over half of my money. When I saw that, my heart dropped, but it'll be worth it in the end, I'm sure. With preparations complete, the boys and I head to the Everfall, and I must say we look kind of imposing. I jump down and grab onto a ledge, start playing a Man of War song, bust that door down, and hype myself up for the fight. The tactics pretty much consist of targeting the tentacles and trying not to die. The bad thing with this boss is the simple fact that it can't be debilitated. It is immune to pretty much all debilitations, which means poison and torpor aren't going to make an appearance for the duration of this battle. It can catch fire though, but it won't last long. Now, the plan is to basically attempt to distract it for the ace up my sleeve to dish out some massive damage. I'll admit, I took a look at some tips online for those having difficulty with the evil eye. The ace is Callister. He is a sorcerer, which means he's basically a magic-based cannon, or in simple terms, magic DPS. The sorcerer vocation is primarily focused on dishing out damage and debuffing enemies. Sorcerers have access to a spell which really helps out in this fight, Bolide. Since Callister is at my level, he's maxed out in terms of vocation rank, which means he has high Bolide. When we pull it off, we do some beefy damage. Now, Manning's job is to basically play tank DPS. Fighters are pretty good at dishing out damage and drawing aggro, being able to shrug off hits with their high defense. Roll will primarily remain as support, buffing the party, healing, and whatnot. My job is to try to keep up the pressure, focusing mostly on physical DPS, which as you can imagine is hard to do with rusted weapons. But I can at least somewhat deal with the tentacles to lower its shield and temporarily stop it from casting its Dispel ability, which will also stifle our skills. I'm not sure if it will affect magically gifted vocations, but it's better to be safe than sorry. The perfect opportunity to pull off the tag team move of the century doesn't leave a lot of room for error. The basic idea is to have Callister start casting High Bolide, sometime before the eye starts casting its Dispel. It's left open to damage when it starts, which means Manning and I have to try to stun it by slicing up some calamari. If we're lucky, Callister will release High Bolide, which has a nice chance to knock it down, leaving it open to further damage from everyone. And damn, our Magi don't mess around. But it takes more than just one time to kill it, and as I said, the opportunity to pull it off is kind of a small window. So just do your best to destroy those tentacles, get it to start casting its Dispel, stay alive, and pray to the Goblin God. I'm in a quick little moment to rant. I hate this thing's dimensional phase shift. It's ping-ponging all over the place like it's taunting me, and it likes to do that often. After some time, careful execution, and luck, you'll have killed the creature. Not going to lie, I celebrated just as much as when I killed the dragon. Now you're free to explore the Everfall to your heart's content. But yeah, the first time you jump down, it doesn't matter what level you land on, this thing is waiting for you. All I can do is wish you good luck. After killing the meatball monster, we have to go through a gauntlet, which is made harder with my terrible damage output. All we really have to do is go through the multiple levels of the Everfall, kill monsters, collect wake stones, and wake stone shards. In order to have a wake stone, you must collect 3 shards or just find them as loot from chests or defeated enemies. Neither the stones nor shards are guaranteed, and there are some downright terrifying things down here. Before we go on what is essentially a suicide run, I need curatives. I buy pretty much all the same stuff as before, except I don't get as many for the pawns. They cost me enough money as is, plus I don't mind sharing if the need arises. It's just super expensive to constantly top the party up with curatives. Now that we have a nice stock of curatives, it's time to do a little inventory management. I dropped some stuff off to free up space so I'm not as encumbered. With all preparations complete, it's time to do a little dungeon crawling. The good thing with the Everfall is you have the slight chance to get some pretty good armor out of it, and, well, of course, weapons. But the really good stuff has like a 4% drop rate. If you want something specific, you'll have to look online for tips and tricks, as I want to get this video out as soon as possible. You'll probably notice the naming of the areas we have to go through. For example, the first one I went through was the Chamber of Absence. Yeah, the depressing name scheme doesn't stop until about the bottom 3. Then there are the loading screen tips that have changed to be a little more nerve-wracking, such as prepare yourself for a grueling battle, the most powerful of foes, yet await deeper inside, and if you would proceed, best be prepared for every contingency. I'll be honest, I love it, but it does feel quite oppressive. And that's the kind of feeling they're going for. It's supposed to be a dark, bleak, dangerous place that only the most seasoned adventurers should go through. Well, besides Bitter Black Isle, but that's a story for another time. We've got 3 wake stones, plus I think the one that Quince gave us, and need 20 to continue forward. Okay, time for the monster slaying. So first up is the Chamber of Absence, which has Geosaurians, Hellhounds, and Skeleton Magi. The Saurians are up first on the chopping block, and while they have a decent amount of health, I can inflict torpor on them. So they are killed with moderate difficulty. I was feeling confident until the Hellhounds basically stormed the stairs. That was terrifying as there aren't many places to run, and, well, manning kept falling. But I stayed in there and hunkered down with the party, as it was still safer than running straight into them. I primarily wanted to try to torpor them as they are naturally slippery targets. Once we get past the Staircase of Doom, there are more Hellhounds to fight. Except I stayed outside of their aggro range and picked most of them off from afar. It is a little difficult for me to see since it is pretty dark down here and the light emanating from the lantern isn't all that helpful. Some of these chambers have another part to them. The Chamber of Absence is no exception. The next enemy we face are Grim Goblins with some possible Hobgoblins thrown into the mix. Grim Goblins are still pretty tough to take out as they have some good health, good damage, and are faster than their more common counterparts. But they aren't immune to torpor, so we can handle them after a while of battle. Not to mention if I use Lycian Shot on one that isn't in their combat stance, I can almost one-shot them. The next chamber is the Chamber of Distress. We're greeted right at the door by direwolves and snow harpies. It's kind of like your average Walmart. These enemies are quite easy at this point. Probably doesn't help that I have support bonds that know what the hell they're actually doing. We kill all of them and move forward, fend off more snow harpies, and find a door. We'll come back to that after I've explored the top layer. The top layer has more, you guessed it, snow harpies and direwolves. For the most part, each floor has its own enemy composition. Sometimes it's just direwolves and snow harpies, and other times it's a hydra. Anyway, after we kill and loot everything, we head through that door I found earlier. Guess what? There's a worm in here. Also, guess what? I can inflict torpor on it. So I focus down the heart while everyone else pelts it with spells and blows. It did use its roar to knock all of the pawns out, and I responded by repeatedly cutting its heart. Of course, Callister had to cast High Bolide before falling. Show off. With that, the worm is dead, and I pick everyone up. Next up is the Chamber of Anxiety, which has basically everything that could be considered undead in here. I mean, actual undead skeletons and a white. This battle was hard fought, with that many bony boys running around, which are quite tanky by the way, and the out-of-control Halloween decoration, it wasn't the smoothest battle in the world. But with Roll buffing most of the party with Holy Affinity, it was only a moderate challenge. There isn't another area to go to, so after everything is made dead again, we leave. I decided to try my hand at the Chamber of Apprehension. It didn't go well. Then again, with 2 cockatrices, some grim goblins, and vile eyes scattered about, it was a recipe for disaster. In all of the chaos, everyone was basically defending themselves while I tried to get rid of one of the giant birds, which didn't work out at all. Of course, Manning was swarmed with goblins, and after getting a feel for the area, I had to make a tactical retreat back to some semblance of safety. Not wanting to stop just yet, I make a stop at the Chamber of Tragedy. There's nothing too crazy in here, just succubi and gargoyles. Gargoyles are dangerous foes because they can easily turn you into stone if you're careless. They're weak to lightning and holy spells, and as you could easily imagine for something made out of stone, they're also weak to blunt damage. Too bad I don't really have access to a blunt weapon. Regardless, they only take time to kill as they can be clonked out of the sky with ranged attacks, and they have some decent health. This time after clearing the area, I head back to Grand Soren to rest up and buy some more curatives. Since I'm right there, I also get the preemption augment to hopefully capitalize on the ability to stay outside of certain enemy aggro ranges, as well as the skill 5-fold flurry. Try to say that 5 times fast. After that, I sleep and go pay a visit to the apothecary. When I'm ready, I go and manage my inventory and have 8 wake stones on rock. I drop them off so I'm not even tempted to use them, and well, when you stack them up, they get kind of heavy. Next up is the Chamber of Sorrow. There's pretty much nothing but a bunch of tentacles flailing around, so instead of fighting them all, I just run through, open any chests, and continue forward. The door I went through led to another evil eye. Sorry, not battling that oversized meatball again. I jumped down into the Everfall again and landed at the Chamber of Hope. See, that one isn't depressing. We're greeted by hellhounds and stout undead. Nothing difficult to deal with. After eliminating everything that moved, the party and I went through the next door. This is where all the interesting enemies were. Okay, I lied. There was one slightly interesting enemy, and that was none other than the Gore Chimera. Of course, it had some help in the form of skeleton magi that managed to irritate me enough for me to scatter them like dust to the wind. This Chimera was a little tougher than the previous one, or 2 we thought, because this stupid cat regrew its snake tail. Regardless, we showed the kitty we have claws and move on. After that, I go back to the surface to manage my inventory once again, drop off my 5 wake stones, and we have a total of 16 stones sitting in storage. 4 more to go. Since I wanted to see if enemies respawn down here where the sun never shines, I made a little detour to the Chamber of Tragedy again. It looks like they do, which is kind of good news for me, because that means I can somewhat farm wake stones. We kill everything again, and I take the time to look around, and it looks like I missed a couple of chests during my first visit. I take another trip to the surface for a little inventory management and get right back to it. I entered the Chamber of Hesitation, and good gravy was that a terrible idea. The enemy we had to face for what felt like a dog's age, saurian sages. Not only are they extremely tough, but they have access to healing magic, making them even more of a pain to deal with. The only thing I could do was inflict torpor on them and hope the others could dish out enough damage to deal with them. It took a while, but we killed them without hitting their weakness. They are weak to dark spells, by the by. There was a door deeper in the chamber, and that's when I saw a Hydra and immediately turned around to get as far away from it as possible, because that thing could wipe the party with little effort. So I decided to jump into the Everfall once more and found myself at the Chamber of Remorse. There wasn't anything in the first room besides loot and some pawns. One of them was a vendor. Without much else to do, we go forward through a door. Hey, I found all the bad things that want to kill us. The first thing I see, a golem with some grim goblins scattered around the area. Seeing as I don't feel like trying to kill that walking rock with rusted up daggers and a rusted bow, I took out the goblins and ran past it. At the bottom of the stairs was a Cyclops. We've killed tons of them by now, so you know what happened. On the bottom floor, I fought more goblins and got the hell out of there. It's everyone's favorite section. That's right, more inventory management. Yay. Thankfully, we had 4 wake stones and 1 shard, so that means it's time to go and finish this run once and for all. Now it's time to go to Quince and give her the wake stones. The combined power of the wake stones will open a pretty sizable and powerful rift. She warns me that once I go through, there is no coming back. So I go back to the surface one last time to check and see if any interesting skills can be unlocked. There weren't any that caught my eye, so I head back down and get ready for the final push. This is going to be a bit complicated to do because this part of the game is extremely cutscene heavy, but fret not, I'll do my best to recount what happens in a timely fashion. Rock is transported to an otherworldly site, a place that looks as if it were made of a sea of clouds. In the distance is a throne and a person dressed in a pure glowing white robe sitting upon it. That is the Seneschal, or in much easier to understand terms, basically God. The Seneschal greets you and luckily doesn't beat around the bush, saying, "Defeat me and take my place as keeper of this world." The Seneschal parts the clouds and shows Rock that they meant the world he has lived in. After pushing Rock with a force blast, the Seneschal stands and readies for a fight. Thankfully, the Seneschal isn't a challenge at all. They're pretty weak and only have one attack, which is basically a blast of light that travels straight to the Arisen. It's pretty easy to dodge, so at this point you shouldn't have any trouble with it. After the first fight, the Seneschal demonstrates some of their power. Since they are the keeper of the world, they also have the power to create whatever they wish. The Seneschal creates a copy of the Arisen only to push the copy, purge it with a fireball, and then explains that the world's denizens are empty vessels, much like pawns. The only ones even allowed to see this truth is an Arisen, and only an Arisen that defeats the Seneschal is deemed to have a strong enough will to preside over the world. Time for the second fight. Nothing changes as this is meant more for a small lore dump and that's basically it, it's just window dressing. Keep dodging and hitting the Seneschal when you can. After the second fight, the Seneschal offers an ultimatum: to take your right as Arisen, or to go and live a short, albeit peaceful life. This trial is a bit different. You'll find yourself in a tunnel of clouds, or at least something similar to that, with all the people you've met in your journey. Some will stop you to offer some words, Mason saying that the praises of the easy life aren't often mentioned, and Chief Adaro not wanting to influence your decision, telling you that you should follow your heart. Regardless of what they say to you, they will attack you immediately after they talk. Some of them don't even say anything and just bum rush you. They all fall in one hit, so unless you purposefully stand there and do nothing, you have nothing to worry about. At the end of the tunnel is your beloved, in Rock's case, Sir Maximilian, who doesn't say anything and is put down. After that, you have one more trial, to fight the Seneschal in what is essentially their true form. It's not as bad as it sounds, as the Seneschal is the character from the tutorial and his pawn. Roll is summoned here as well, and we have what I'd call a scuffle rather than an actual fight. This part isn't meant to be difficult, but you can die if you're careless. After spraying his pawn with arrows, he is sitting there weakened. This is where Roll has to grab him for the final hit. Once that's been completed, Rock is the new Seneschal. Your first order of business as God is to grant the previous Seneschal peace. You do this by walking up to him and selecting the option to wield the God's Bane blade. The Seneschal is undying, only being able to be killed by that one blade. The Seneschal tells you not to mourn him, as he is happy to be free of eternity. Once you shove that blade into his chest, he will die and you'll be left to your own devices. Now the one thing you can do as the new Seneschal is sit on the throne, which will allow you to walk around Cassardus and I'm pretty sure the main part of Grand Soren. You can't really do anything other than assault the people going about their business. Once you're bored of being a psychopath, all you're left with is time to think. Well, that is until you get bored and look up what to do online. You see, this has been an endless cycle. Multiple Arisen have had the opportunity to become the Seneschal. Some have succeeded, others have died only to become the dragon that they once killed. Yeah, it's kind of a screwed up fate, but hey, that's not your fault, so keep your chin up, champ. The only thing you can do is use God's Bane blade on yourself. Up until now, it has only proven useful as a way to get the loot tables in the Everfall to refresh. Now it serves a purpose, a way to end this vicious cycle. And so you plunge the blade into your chest and die. Your pawn will kneel by your body, only to have the clouds underneath them give way, and along with your body, they fall through the Everfall, attempting to reach you, probably in a futile attempt to know that you're alive, even though you're not. Something funky happened though, and your pawn basically had their soul shoved into your body. They wake up on the beach of Cassidus yelling for their master, only to start having a slight mental breakdown as their entire reason for living is now gone. They then realize that they aren't in their normal gear or body for that matter. This is where your beloved comes into play once more. They will find you on the beach. In Rock's case, it was Sir Maximilian. He doesn't say anything, only smiles and looks relieved that his love is alive, seemingly unaware that it isn't Rock, but Roll. And with that, the run is finished. Boy, was that an experience. I hate to sound like a broken record, but this video took me a while to make. Not as long as a stick run, I think, but it still takes a bunch of effort and time to go through something like this, condense it down to be more digestible, and type up an entertaining script. So I would highly appreciate it if you liked, shared, and subscribed. Even more so if you want to see me attempt more challenge runs in the future, because I really do enjoy making them. I'm actually surprised I only died once. Given the circumstances of the run, I think this was a decent attempt. I defeated the dragon with rusted weapons and Roll as my only companion for the entire fight, so there's a small win for the history books. But after that, things took a turn for the worse due to the evil eye. Even though it is void due to an unnecessary rule mucking things up at the tail end of the run, I still enjoyed my time with this challenge. And it's okay that I didn't technically win, because this still pushed me and kept that fire of determination going strong. It goes to show that while a strong will can see you through to the end of most things, there'll be a time or two when you need some good friends to lean on for support. Anyway, that's it for me everyone. This has been Burnt Toaster from Burnt Toaster Productions, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now. So we noped out of there after the coast was clear.
Hey, why you meowing? Why you talking? Why you talking, little child? Come on. Come on, get up here. Get up here, damn it. Come on.
Oh, you little roober. You little roober. What the f is a roober? 3, 2, 1.
Hey, could you calm down? Could you calm down, young lady? I swear to baby Jesus.
Ugh.